Hey, you caught me again. It's Reverend Mark Hughes, the Executive Director of Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. And we're here. It's the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance monthly community television program here on CCTV, Center for Media and Democracy, Town Meeting TV. Juxtaposition is the program. Juxtaposition, issues affecting black folks and black folks affecting change. So happy to be with you today. Fall back, go deep. That's what we're working with today. Fall back, go deep. Boy, do we've got some things going on, some things to cover. Let's get right after it. So, if the legislative biennium was a football game, you could say that we're going into the fourth quarter because it's 2 years. We're getting ready to move into this period called crossover. That's what's happening this week. So if our team is the, let's just say the racial equity and the justice team, then it's not looking like we're winning. Why is it that the team is really facing such stiff competition? Let's talk about that today. And also, did we train well enough in order to get this done? Did we do the right training? And do we have the right folks on the team, or do we have the folks on the team that are going to actually get the job done? Or do we have some folks on the team that are probably playing better for the other team? Who knows? Maybe we're just being outplayed. Go team. So we're going to talk a little bit about this today. Let's talk about crossover in the legislative session, the good, the bad, and the ugly. How are we doing? So I want to talk to you about that. But before we get too far into this conversation, take you to my first slide. If you take a look at this is just a reminder. What are we doing here? The work that we've been trying to do here across the legislative session has been to address systemic racism. And it would be painful for us to even have this conversation without acknowledging the fact that we've gone into this work understanding that systemic racism is an unjustly gained political and economic power of whites and the continuing economic and other resource inequalities along racial lines. And of course, the emotion-laden racist framing created by whites to maintain and rationalize their privilege and power. Why am I educating you? Because if we don't properly define the issue, then we're never going to solve it. So I think that's the long and short of, what I want you to go into this conversation understanding. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we'll do is I'm going to talk you through kind of the method to our madness as we were trying to do some things. I've got some updates across all of our areas of policy that we were seeking to try to address. Just take a look at this slide, and this is some of them. This is some of the stuff that we were looking to do. As you recall, our legislative agenda this year was do the work, and it ranged across a very broad spectrum of categories. Thanks for that slide. But so what did we do? What were we trying to get done here? Well, first of all, some of the updates that we have is I'm going to talk a little bit about follow through, first of all, because we've offered testimony in House Agriculture as well as government operations with the hopes of achieving some level of support. That's for sufficient and sustainable equity funds, because we've never had sufficient or sustainable equity funds, never. There's also some unallocated cannabis excise taxes that the legislature could put forward to get some of this work done. We've been talking to them about it, trying to correct some of this generational economic harm to marginalized communities caused by decades of federal policy. So again, that's why I started you on this dance that we're doing with understanding what systemic racism is, because of course what we're trying to do is the hope and some of the work that we're getting done here, it has everything to do with the addressing economic policy. Cannabis excise tax dollars are a logical and obviously an appropriate solution in addressing some of this harm. And we've been proposing that would happen with a 20% excise tax dollar fund to the marginalized community investment fund. That we've been talking about this for like 5 years. So we're still not there yet. So this term, what we did is we floated the idea of funding this ongoing social equity work, such as what we wanted to do is we wanted to fund, organizations like the Health Equity Advisory Commission, like the Land Access Opportunity Board, fund them with some of these excise taxes, because I believe 70% of them are currently unallocated. We're really believing that is going to go at least towards solving the problem. Take a look at this slide. One of the things that we've been talking about for a while is the fact that this same legislature, many of them are still serving in this body. They went back. They came in. I'd like to say they went in deep. I think that's the term that we're using. Go deep. So they went in deep a few years ago, and they said, hey, it's resolved that we're committed to this sustained and deep work of eradicating systemic racism through state actively fighting racist policies, and also participating in the creation of more just and equitable systems. So this is kind of on the books. It's floating around there. I don't know whether anybody's actually looking at it, but this right here, this is one of the things that we were hoping that they'd be focused on. Thanks for that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that we went in for, that we were hoping to accomplish this session. How about, believe it or not, an economic justice policy? You'd imagine that economic justice might be very important. It might be one of the things that the legislature would want to go in and take a look at in terms of moving policy. What is that? It was really going in and figuring out what are some of the structural things, such as principles, such as just some of the baseline roles and duties and responsibilities, and linking all of that back into equity. The other piece is we also were looking to fund a network of what we call cultural empowerment centers across the state, something similar to what we've accomplished with the Richard Kim Center. Of course, geographic dependent mission there that would be related to where it is actually resided, and it would connect back into a cultural empowerment network, and there'd be programs and services offered through these across the communities. This got zero traction, which is mind-boggling at this point in time, mostly because one of the things that we've talked about is the fact that the wealth gap, the whole wealth gap that we have here in the United States. We know that across the United States that the median wealth of a black family is about 1/13 the median wealth of a white family. Take a look at this slide. So we've been talking about this for a while now. It's befuddling. It's almost like skullduggery to sit around scratching our head wondering what we should do in terms of policy to address systemic racism, understanding that at its core is economic disparities. Thanks for that slide. So that was what, it never came off the wall. We never got any traction on that at all. This is the second biennium that this bill has been on the wall here in House, and I think it's House Housing and I think Housing and General Affairs or something like that. Tom Stevens Committee. So shame on you. This is why we're going into the fourth quarter of the ball game, and we are losing. Let's talk about another one. H432. H432. Reparations. My hair's on fire. Everybody loses their mind talking about reparations. Yeah, they do, and it's kind of a funny conversation until it's not. But believe it or not, this has been. I want to say this has been the, fourth Yeah, I think this has been probably somewhere around the fourth, the third. It's the third biennium that reparations has been introduced. Take a look at this slide. This is kind of funny. I like to talk about this all the time. I think they're still fighting over the W. So somebody went deep. There was no receiver downfield. I don't know what happened there, but we're still going after this reparation. They did take testimony this term. So there was some glimmer of hope. Thanks for that slide. Little glimmer of hope there, but at the end of the day, it went nowhere. So those are a couple of policies that we put forward. You probably remember last week we were together. Last month, and it was Backwards Day. If you didn't see that episode with the esteemed Professor Peter Teachout, you might want to go see that, because that was a good one. It was our last month's episode called Backwards Day. We call it Backwards Day because the Equal Protection Clause seems like it's hurting black folks more than it's actually helping them. So one of the things that we were thinking about doing was just going in offering a constitutional amendment, which is now PR4. This constitutional amendment on equal protection, we did find consensus with the Human Rights Commission, the Office of Racial Equity, the ACLU, Professor Teachout. We all agreed that there should be a separate article in the Constitution. There's an example out there that we put forward. Now, it's important that the language also be refined to ensure that we're able to memorialize the intent of this constitutional amendment. And I think that's what the Judiciary Committee in the Senate is struggling with right now. I'm wondering, as they're kind of batting this thing around, and I believe it's going to, the hope is we'll have another pass at it on Friday, and there's a good possibility that this may actually get out of committee. This may actually get out of committee to the floor of the Senate as early as late this week. And I know you're scratching your head. You're like, wow, you got a constitutional amendment that's moving. It's kind of a big deal. So there's, it's my notes here. I'm looking at my notes here. It says that it's really what we're doing is we're ensuring the foundation that supports a clear path to an option for the evolving state jurisprudence on equal protection in Vermont. You see, the existing, if you were watching it last week, I think towards the top of the of our conversation, Peter Teachout and I, we were talking about this business about jurisprudence on equal protection. He said that that's probably not something that we'd want to dig into in that particular conversation. I disagree. I don't think our challenge here is about the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment at all. I think it's about the federal jurisprudence of the Equal Protection Clause. So, because it is the floor, the federal jurisprudence is what we're seeking to establish in expanding equal protection in the state is the ceiling. And we want to try to get ourselves away from just running some type of parallelism with the feds and what they're doing. Systemic racism and other forms of systemic oppression. Here's the deal. They create wealth disparities, and they're indirectly affecting our health and our wellness. And get this, they're threatening economic growth in the state of Vermont, and they're ultimately even placing our democracy at risk. This is important. Folks, watch PR4, okay? So that's coming out of Senate Judiciary. We did get a screen pass. We maybe got 22 yards on it or something like that. I don't know. Time will tell. We'll see what happens. Things can still crash and burn. Somebody might drop the ball. Somebody could fumble. We'll see what happens. The amendment serves as a foundation for expanding protections. This to include the development and the use of an equal protection doctrine that could ensure the survival of governmental solutions designed to redress discriminatory policies and practices and correct disparate outcomes. This could also enable us to sustain attacks on existing protected civil liberties as they exist today, and also support the expansion of the protections of and to additional classifications as needed. So these protections, they'll also include the tools that we so much need to thwart the emerging challenges of discriminatory algorithms and old harms that federal protections currently are ineffective in addressing. So keep an eye out on this whole idea of equal protections. It's something that we want to make sure we get over the finish line. Let me tell you one more piece about this, and that is, here's the deal. This constitutional amendment must leave the Senate, arrive in the House, in-house committee and judiciary, Martin Lalonde. It must come out of that committee. It must go into a public hearing. It must come out of that public hearing, go back to the floor of the House, and be voted out of the House all before this legislative session this year, which is in the month of May, ends. So stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting game. Bring popcorn. Let's talk about a little bit about oversight and independence. You probably don't hear a lot about oversight and independence, and let me tell you why. It's because most people think that our legislature, at this football game, that this is all about just passing. And I'm using passing as analogous to just one tool in the toolbox. There's 4 tools that our legislature has in the toolbox. So they got a running game, they got special teams, fill in the other blank if you're a sports enthusiast. And here's the thing is in addition to policy, there's also appropriations. We know that there's oversight. And then, of course, there's appointment authority that our Senate also has to confirm appointments of our governor. So there's a lot of tools that we can use in the ball game to get the game done. But here's the thing: we've been asking for, get this, a series of government operations committee meetings with extensive community involvement to create an independent police oversight board with state jurisdiction and investigative and subpoena powers and authority. Why? Well, you might imagine it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to make something bigger, more powerful, more effective, and more oppressive when you have little or no oversight over it. So I'm going to say it loud: the State Police Advisory Commission never has worked, and there is no other statewide apparatus that's providing oversight. In fact, I'll take that another level. The State Police Advisory Commission doesn't even have oversight of the other 78 agencies. It's only the state police that it has oversight over, and it does that very poorly. And despite the fact that they covered 90% of the landmass and encompass, they probably have, I would say, well over, generally somewhere between 1,000 and 1,300 folks. At the end of the day, that oversight apparatus is not suitable, is not doing the job. We also, by the way, believe that we need to go back to a conversation on this whole business of qualified immunity. What is that? So we need to go back and take a closer look at that as well. We're hoping that folks are helping us reach out to the House Government Operations. I know there's new chairs there. We were hoping that as a result of those new chairs being in place, that we would have no longer captured chairs and we would have some folks who would be effectively being able to do the work. But I think that they've fallen into the same trap. We need to have those conversations. Let's talk about housing now, because we know that the legislature is talking about housing, a lot about housing. What they're not talking about is what we want to talk about. So housing advocates and developers, they are climate activists as well. You see a lot of them. They're finally acknowledging some of the harm that has been done by Act 250. I figured that we were going to see a lot of activity on this, and we were correct. There's a lot of things going on Act 250. But again, here's the sad news. Okay, so we see now that Act 250 has limited population growth. Now we understand that Act 250 has stifled economic growth. Now we're seeing very clearly that Act 250 has bottlenecked housing inventory. We see that now. But there is no appetite whatsoever to have a discussion on how Act 250 has historically and continues to contribute to suppressing racial diversity, as well as black generational wealth in Vermont. So that is incredibly problematic, especially to be in the fourth quarter of the ball game, having made all of these commitments that we're going to, racism is a public health emergency, R113, oh yeah, we get it, it's economic, but now once we feel the pain, and why do we feel the pain? Because whenever you create a policy that's exclusive, at the end of the day, it ends up hurting everyone. That is what we're experiencing. But the challenge is that if you don't acknowledge the fact that the policy was exclusive and oppressive and acknowledge the harm that it did, then you can't go back and correct what it is that the damage that you've caused. In fact, the system of oppression remains, and it continues to perpetuate. And with the current trajectory that we're on right now, that's pretty much where we're headed. Yeah, we're going to be able to build some more houses, but we're not going to be acknowledging the harm that we've caused, nor are we going to be correcting the damage that we've done. So we're asking our legislators, as they pass this policy out, hey, let's get some language in there that does just this. So this is not happening. We don't have a tremendous amount of hope. Is just like a couple bienniums ago when we went to amend the Constitution to abolish slavery. We wanted language in there to make sure that folks understood that this was serving as the foundation of addressing systemic racism. That language never made it across the finish line. You'll see it in the as introduced policy, but it never made it across the finish line because we're too busy trying to be exceptional and not acknowledge what it is that we've done. You go back and look at a previous episode called Demographics, which we did just a couple months ago. You'll see more on Act 250. Here's the hard part, walking back of the criminal justice reform. This is painful, very, very painful to talk about because the legislature has been quietly stripping back portions of the progress that we've made in the criminal justice reform and the justice reinvestment work that we've done just over the last few years. Some of these decisions are rooted in fear-mongering. Some of it is just flat-out gaslighting. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to see black and brown bodies that are going to be most severely impacted again. When the smoke clears, we're going to see that what they're doing right now is going to cause a disproportionate harm, again, to black folks primarily. So sadly, as we look around, the black prison population continues to be at a staggering 10 or 11% right now, while the black population in Vermont is barely at 1.5%. That's today. We know, estimate, there's probably somewhere around 1,300 plus folks incarcerated today, in prison today. About 150 to 160 of them remain in Mississippi, and here the remainder are in Vermont prisons. So mark this word is that we will see this proliferate as a result of all of the policies that they're moving forward. There should be an implementation delay. There should be an implementation delay on the criminal justice reform rollbacks to allow for an outside impact assessment to review, to enable us to understand the totality of the collective policy changes that are actually happening. This will also allow for the racial equity review of the state's investment in systems of prevention and mental health and other social support systems. You see, we've seen the generational and irreparable harm caused by past spontaneously reactive and emotionally informed implementation of criminal justice policy. I spent probably about 2 hours on with the racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile justice system advisory panel, an apparatus that we created as a result of our policy. that is captive and is powerless to actually affect the change that needs to happen in this area. Let me give you quickly just a couple examples of what I'm talking about. S58, dropping requirement for criminal culpability of all drug offenses, should have this is like there's a standard effect. The effect is to expand the scope of possible criminal conduct falling within these offenses and making it easier for law enforcement officers to arrest, charge, and secure drug convictions. H655, eliminating expungement as we know it. H534, the expansion of theft-related offenses and penalties. H563, the expansion of auto-related offenses and penalties. H27, vastly expands qualifying activity and ease in securing relief for abuse orders, ex parte civil proceedings. And the list goes on and on and on. So back to where we started as we move towards a conclusion. If the legislative biennium was a football game, we would say that we are losing. While all of this stuff is going on, what is the legislature doing? What are they doing to address systemic racism as they committed? Why are we not winning the football game? You know, has the legislature grown as we see a national pattern? Have they grown into this racial justice, emotional stigma of just exhaustion? Have they figured that they've just simply done enough and their job is done here and it's time to run victory laps? Why is it that they're not in the ball game with us? Why are we not moving this agenda forward as we committed? Has everyone, have our white allies, our progressive liberal white allies grown tired of the fight that we committed to? Has everyone forgotten about Brother George Floyd who has died? Or did everybody forget what the pandemic laid bare? Why are we not winning this game? Why are we in the fourth quarter? Could it be that there's another election cycle upcoming and everybody needs to be tough on crime? Do we need more inflammatory rhetoric and dog whistles to blow so folks can run around and have another Willie Horton moment, as opposed to protecting the civil liberties of black folks that we've committed to? All of these questions and more, we hope will be answered in this legislative session. We're not winning the ball game. Go deep. Get open. We need some help today. Somebody should step in. Put me in, coach. Put me in today. Now it's time for us to do the work in this last quarter of this game, to take the ball over the finish line, to make sure that we do not renege on the promises that we've made to one another to get this very, very important work done. Now is our time. This is our moment. It's been Juxtaposition here, Reverend Mark Hughes. Issues affecting black folks affecting change. Fall back. Go deep. Till next month. See you then.